And I just want to acknowledge from the committee what an excellent and fulsome discussion that was, and I think it was really important to get those questions asked and answered. So thank you. And thank you to Shale, in particular from the local board, and Michael from OTAT. Thank you.
The conversation will continue. Yes.
Excellent. We go to item number 18, which is the Sport and Rec Community Access Scheme. Warm welcome back to Mace and Sharon and Kerry. Okay, over to you.
Lovely. I'm very aware of time, so I'll keep this very brief. Good afternoon, members. I would like to highlight briefly a few key points as outlined in the report. And if time, provide local board views and staff recommendations. So the purpose of the scheme is to provide community access to identified gaps in the regional network of sport and recreation facility provision, and to improve equity of access. Under the guidelines, the decision sits with the governing body, the Environment Community Committee, to make funding allocations to facilities that fulfil a role in the regional network. The local boards have a significant role in defining the outcomes and key performance indicators for the facilities. Once the regional funding decisions have been made, the budget sits with the relevant local board as asset-based service budget. The total budget for the Community Access Scheme is just over $1 million. There is no additional budget available to support community access, therefore limited ability to address equity issues. Further to the Environment and Community Committee workshop on the 13th of April of this year, the assessment of the 8 existing legacy arrangements has been completed. The 8 legacy arrangements were invited to submit a proposal with strategies to support the implementation of the Community Access Scheme. They were individually assessed against the prioritisation criteria within the guidelines. It is difficult to compare across organisations as they each provide different types of community provision, for example, sporting, leisure and community, and are within different communities. Workshops were held with 6 of the 7 directly affected local boards to seek feedback on the proposals as part of the assessment of each facility. The overall assessment identified the 8 existing arrangements fill a gap in the regional network of sport and recreation facility provision, and the recommended levels of funding will ensure the facilities will continue to provide programs and services to the community and are financially sustainable. Detailed assessment and local board views for each organisation are available in a summary report, which I have actually brought with me today. The following slides provide more information for each facility, however, I'm just going to touch on the local board views and the staff recommendations. So for Sovereign Stadium, the Upper Harbour Local Board support continued funding for the stadium, and 3 members support the additional funding for the aquatic centre. However, this assessment relates to existing arrangements, and therefore it is recommended that the funding support for the pool is considered as a separate process. It is recommended that the current level of funding to AUT Millennium Ownership Trust of $60,000 is provided for 2017-2018, and following the development of the Sports Facility Investment Plan, consideration of a longer term agreement is given. So Avondale College. Faux local boards support the intent of the Community Access Scheme and Avondale College's role within the regional network of sport and recreation facility provision. However, we're unable to comment on the level of funding due to the insufficient information within the budget. Further to the workshop, information has been provided to the local board, however we haven't received feedback as yet. The recommended option is to increase funding to Avondale College to $40,000 per annum to increase community access to include the stadium, hockey turf and 6 netball courts. This is an increase of 23,000. Within the proposal, Tamaki College Community Recreation Centre Trust has requested the current level of funding of $100,000. Maungakiki Tamaki local boards support the recommendation to maintain the current level of funding of $100,000. The recommended option, therefore, is to maintain the current level of funding of $100,000 per annum to provide community access to the Tamaki Recreation Centre. ASB Stadium. The Ōrākei local board supports an increase in funding for ASB Stadium. The recommended option is to increase funding to East City Community Trust to $90,000 per annum to provide community access to ASB Stadium. The recommended option would ensure the existing level of community access is provided and an increase in operational funding may assist with deferred maintenance costs. This is an increase of $10,000. Waiheke Recreation Centre. So Waiheke local board's supports for the proposal was split, with 4 members supporting the proposal. However, concerns were raised over potential duplication of proposed after-school and school holiday programs on the island. 1 local board member did not support the proposal or an increase in funding for Waiheke Recreation Centre. The recommended option is to increase funding to Waiheke Recreation Centre Trust to $80,000 per annum to provide community access to Waiheke Recreation Centre. This is an increase of $5,000. So Puru Community Centre. Puru Community Centre has undergone a wider independent review to establish the preferred model of delivery. The independent review concluded the most efficient and effective delivery model for the Te Puru Community Centre is under a community ownership and management model. In April of this year, Franklin Local Board agreed the most efficient and effective delivery model for the Te Puru Community Centre is under a community ownership and management model where the Trust continues to employ staff to deliver services at the facility. The recommended option is to provide funding to Te Puru Community Centre Trust of $325,000 per annum to provide community access to Te Puru Community Centre. This is the same level of funding as previous years. Kolmar, so that's also known as Papataui Sports Centre. In addition to the current community access funding, Kolmar has received $40,000 per annum from Otara Papataui Local Board for the maintenance of the bowling green. There is no ongoing budget provision for this for future years. The recommended option is to increase community access funding to Kolmar Charitable Trust to $150,000 per annum to provide community access to Kolmar. The Otara Papataui Local Board supports an increase in funding for Kolmar, and the increase would be $50,000 per annum. The Auckland Netball Centre, lastly. The Ōrākei Local Board supports an increase in funding for Auckland Netball Centre. It is recommended that the current level of funding of $150,000 to Auckland Netball is provided for the next financial year, and following the development of the Sports Facility Investment Plan, consideration of a longer-term agreement is given.
Sorry, we're just a bit distracted. We now just have a quorum.
Still got a quorum, yeah.
So I'm sorry, Whānau.
Going.
Pare
going.
Paku
I'll wait.
stops out.
Yeah, Wayne, we've both got a meeting, but you'll stay. I have to go.
Mike's just gone out for a second.
I
but he'll
know,
be back.
It's the
and
same.
this is why I said at the beginning, we've tracked you the meeting within 6 minutes of exactly how it would go, and we have you landing on the runway at 4:15 or 4:30 if there is any more speaking. But I'm afraid we haven't had tailwinds and we just had a few headwinds, so we're running a bit short of time. Actually, while we've just got a
Madam
break,
Chair, I will move the motion.
we just need to just do a little quick check. We do need to move an extension of time of, say, 30 minutes.
I'll second.
Okay,
30
but you
minutes.
need we need everyone.
Be quiet.
We need to do it again, we will, but we need to keep
So it's
everybody
been moved
here.
and seconded, Madam Chair.
Well, just hang on, it's all very well, everyone rushing now. There was a hell of a lot of talking beforehand, so I think we just, some people may want to ask questions on this. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, staff. So we're on the netball.
Netball has been completed, and the last slide, which is the slide there, these are recommendations in the current level of investment. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Awesome, okay. Questions? Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I just want to register my concern around Auckland Netball Centre. It's been given this amount of funding since 2010. It hasn't gone up at all. It's got the highest visits per annum of anything mentioned. And the only other one that's got the same, which is the Tamaki Recreation Centre, has had support from the local board, and the local board doesn't support no increase to Auckland Netball Centre. I mean, probably out of all of the above, potentially AUT and Papatoe, it's definitely a regional, sub-regional, if not regional. It's not a local little, Waiheke local board facility. It's significant, and as I said, with it's got the highest number of users, and it had no increase since this council started, and I don't believe that's appropriate.
Through you, Madam Chair, as Kerry outlined earlier, there is no additional budget available in terms of this community access scheme. So whilst we appreciate the region-wide nature of it and what it provides, we currently don't have the ability without additional budget to address some of these wider equity issues and provision gaps that we have.
So with respect, you've given pretty reasonable increases and stuff. You've got a 50k for Papatoe though. I just wondered whether we could
Yes.
do a bit of horse trading.
My recommendation is that we probably, this is maybe as good as we get, and councillors,
my
but
point, I think-
but hang on, councillor Simpson, there is no more money, and let's not forget, if you want to open a can of worms, we could also raise, councillor Clough and I could talk about in the West, all of the regional sports facilities who didn't organise sweetheart deals with their old councils and who receive nothing. So let's not open that can of worms, because don't get us started. These are pretty lucky to be getting what they're getting.
I appreciate that, but I just suppose what I'm saying, with everybody else having a change, unless it's endorsed by the local board, this one doesn't. And I suppose the inequity of that was my point.
Yep. It's heard. I don't know if there's an easy solution, if there is no greater budget, and I don't think you're seeing any of your colleagues offering up money from the organisations that they are in their areas. Councillor Hills.
Yes, I guess to follow on from that, and I know I gave my opinion during the workshop, but I think it's important to mention it again. We are going to need to look at this ongoing. I have a little bit of sympathy, but not really, for Councillor Simpson's point, because like North Shore Netball, we have over 400,000 visitors. 400,000 visitors a year and get zero operational funding, and we probably could have done a whole lot with 150k per annum, and it's open to the public 24 hours. And it can be used by anyone, and it's not being used just for netball, and the local board has been trying to pump a lot of its own discretionary money into that. So, I don't know when this legacy stops and we become just one city where we discuss
Hopefully
this
never.
in a better way.
Works for you.
Hopefully never.
Yeah, just because it still seems very unfair that one netball centre gets 150k a year, and now one has to pay for its own rubbish, toilet cleaning, everything. So, and by raising money through the community. So, yeah, I'd be really keen to see how we get this changed within the next year, because it doesn't seem equitable to keep going on as legacy when we're 7 years out of legacy. So, thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair, we would agree, and one of the issues that that we have is by decreasing support to any of the existing organisations, we have essentially created an issue where we're decreasing community access, particularly impacting on their financial viability and sustainability, to therefore increase somewhere else. So without any additional budget allocation to effectively take from one to support another somewhere else, we're essentially creating an issue where we will have a decline in community services and programs provided, and also risk the financial sustainability of some of these organisations.
You've changed these since the workshop.
So we risk swapping out one inequity and replacing it with another. I think my recommendation to the committee is I think we just need to acknowledge that this, we're agreeing until 2020, apart from AUT until 2018, and then we need to move to resolve this inequitable process. And I know we've got Member Wilcox and Councillor Newman.
Oh, I've just moved it.
Are you happy to move?
I'll second.
And you're happy to second? Okay, Member Wilcox?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see in the Māori impact statement, number 77, all those things. So I'm going to ask, why does Hato Pētera miss out? And that's all I'm going to ask.
So the previous arrangement with Hato Pētera is outside of scope of this of the community access scheme. So the guidelines that were passed by Parks, Sport and Recreation Committee last year do not allow for the community access scheme to be allowed for maintenance of sports fields. That's obviously allocated through other council provision, and in the case of Hato Pētera, council was providing for maintenance of the fields in addition to a community access grant.
Okay, so they have been told, they were told this, were they?
Yes, absolutely. A year or two ago, actually, the shift in the allocation was changed a couple of years ago.
Okay. Yeah, okay then. Yeah, I'm just a little bit concerned. I don't see any there at all. These are the legacy ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why I'm not seeing anything from Te Pai or anything like that.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
We didn't do these kind of deals.
There is a sunset clause, isn't there, in all this kaupapa?
Yep, there is.
Okay.
2020. We're going to sort that out. Right, I've got Councillor Collins, then Councillor Filipaina, then we'll put the recommendation. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. I'm cognizant of the idea that Councillor Simpson had, of which I have some sympathy for, unlike her colleague from the shore. Because I was tempted to move something similar, but I will refrain because I don't think there's an appetite for it. What I did want to comment on is the Kolmar funding. And I want to thank the officers because I know that there's been ongoing discussion. When I was chair of the Otara Papatoetoe local board last term, we gave Kolmar extra assistance to the value of $100,000. And one of the issues that I wanted to bring to this table so that we're all aware of it was when it came to Kolmar funding, the local board had to pick up quite a bit of the funding through its own LDI, and it became unnecessarily political. And I remember a local board meeting that was filled with people. I was getting phone calls from everybody saying this is what's going to happen to you if you don't support this extra 100. At that stage, it was $150,000, and then on the night we received the report, suddenly it became $100,000. The point I'm trying to make is, for Kolmar in particular, we want it to succeed. Yes, there's that kind of sweetheart deal that you referred to, Chair, from the Manukau City Council days, but we want it to do our best to look after them, and I'm refraining today by suggesting that maybe they get even more because they did ask for 200K, and I think that the increase to 150,000 is both equitable and meaningful, and in the eyes of another councillor, huge. But it's important for this facility in particular to keep going, to keep functioning, because it plays a vital part in the well-being of our community. So I just wanted to note that, and I know they'll be tuned in at the moment, and I think we've got to continue an ongoing discussion with them and alongside the local board to ensure that we get the tone of the conversation right, because I don't think it needed to be as political as it was. The other thing I just wanted to ask was, in your opening, you made some comments about how that we make the decision on the allocation of money, and then it sits with AVS, with local boards, and Otara Papatoetoe local board have decided, or are working alongside Kauma to ensure that one of their members sits on the governance structure of Kauma. I just wanted to make sure that that was in place, because I don't want local boards to lose the ability to have the governance impact that they can have. So I guess I'm asking you for your quote so that in writing, so that they can feel assured that they're not going to lose that, because they'll be thinking that the decision making sits with us, and then they lose the ability to stay connected, having granted the fact that they've been working so closely with Kauma. My final comment, Chair, and apologies for the length of this particular comment, but I actually agree that at some stage we've got to work out how this fund works. $1 million, we're sitting around at the end of this meeting chasing ourselves a bit over $1 million. I'm not sure that this is the best way to expend our time focusing on $1 million of allocation. Granted, what you've already said around, if we don't have this allocation, some of these groups might fall over or potentially fall over. So I think we've got to get that discussion right. But I agree with you, Chair, and putting it as it is, just wanted to note that Kauma is dear to the people of Otara Papatoetoe, and any support available to them is going to be well received.
That's very dear indeed.
Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. We've had at least 3 items that we need to discuss around what we do. One was around regional. What is regional, what is sub-regional, and what is not. That was one of them. Then we had a discussion around the courts and having a look at what systems need to be put in place. Here is another one that we need to have this conversation around what happens with the legacy funds. I personally, for me, if the legacy councils looked after their entities, I think they should be commended for that, and also the fact that it continues. Really do. Because I remember when we first became a Auckland Council, both Sharon and I, Councillor Stewart and I ended up putting a recommendation around the airport shares, both of us, and there was a recommendation that we put in, saying that the monies, the dividends that we end up getting back from the Manukau and the Auckland City Council shares, they go back to that particular area. We got wasted with that, right? I think that's just you and I. I think, or 3 of us, we got wasted. It was one of the few that I lost. Thought I'd throw that in. But look...
We came with no debt.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, we would have had a few million going to Manukau, and we would have supported, we would have supported Kauma Charitable Trust at that stage. But look, the conversation has to be made. Now, in regards to Kauma and the report, I think there's only one issue I have with the report, and that is not explaining exactly how much money that Councillor Collins had said had been given from the LDI. So really, it's not 150. It's not an increase of 50,000. It's actually an increase of 8,000. When you have a look at the $142,000 that they were putting into Kauma, and I mean, we know who to blame for that. I'm not going to mention that person's name because he's no longer here. But there were promises made, and you can't hold this council, this triennial council, to task for that. But that, and that's why I just wanted the report. It should have been outlined that, look, as a result, we've had 200,000, but really the local board were picking up, and according to the chair, Lotu Fuli, they had 102 and 40,000 respectively that was supporting Kauma. So when we look at it, get our reports and say, man, they got 150,000, oh man, they got an increase of 50, well, they didn't. It was an increase of 8. So those are just my comments, but I look forward, Chair, to the conversation around the legacy funding in this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chair. We do still love each other, and always will. Councillor Hills.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, Thank you, Member Wilcox, for reminding me. There's resolutions on here about the Hato Petara funding, which council and local board recommended that would be then transferred to North Harbour Netball.
That is correct. That was transferred for 2 years.
So
So previous years.
So this-
There was just a commitment for 2 years to transfer that whilst the guidelines and the review of the existing relationships took place.
So then the money is now, where is that fund now?
It's effectively available for reallocation. That's where some of the slight increases have come from.
Okay.
And there is a balance of funding of 28,000 available.
So couldn't we continue that for North Harbour Netball or not?
So what we've, the approach we've taken, because as we've identified, there's a small amount of additional budget from those arrangements that are no longer deemed in scope of the guidelines. So the review is currently of existing arrangements, not new potential arrangements, because I think as councillors would appreciate, there would be a significant number of potential new community access arrangements that council could enter into, and that needs to follow a different process. However, there's limited budget available to do that, except for a small amount of 28,000.
Okay. I'm just worried that is a local board aware that didn't,
Yes, they were aware that it was for a 2-year, and it's outlined in the reports that were to the local board that reallocated that for a 2-year period.
yeah, no, I remember that, but I think our point was that we couldn't allocate again because it's a new term. So has the opportunity been put to the local board or us?
No, it hasn't.
Is that something you want to follow up?
Yeah, I'm just
Councillor?
concerned that we put it, I think the advice at the time was we couldn't allocate into this term as an ongoing, and now I'm just concerned that it was an ongoing agreement, and then our view was that because it wasn't going to Hato Petara, then it could be in the same Northcote area put to netball because of this ongoing discrepancy, and I'm just wondering, can we allocate that to North Harbour Netball, or can something come back? I just assume that the netball and the board may think this continues on and they've sort of missed it.
No, through the chair, it was always a 2-year arrangement while the guidelines were being developed and the current arrangements were under review.
Yeah,
We're just talking about the 28,000.
yeah.
Yeah.
But is it possible to try and get that in the mix as at least something for North Harbour Netball, because that money was legacy to Kaipātiki, for instance, and now no? Or
Through the chair, as I commented earlier, I think if we're considering new arrangements and new community access agreements is probably a different process
I
to
think
the existing ones we're considering today.
Can we just deal with these ones, and can we actually pick that discussion up separately, Councillor Hills? I
Yeah.
think my brain won't compute
Yeah,
this 28,000 and the ins and outs of dealing with that in the short time frame we've got. So I don't want to dismiss the issue, but I think we just need to deal with the issue in hand. So we've got the recommendations, they've been moved and seconded. I'm going to put all those in favour, but please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
Please say aye.
Please say no, please say aye. That's carried, somewhat ineffectively on my part, but carried nonetheless. And we will pick up the issue that Councillor Hills raises, and perhaps let people know maybe what the resolution to that 28,000 is.
thank you, sorry.
Thank you. Now,